Most agents lose the listing appointment before they ever talk about commission. Surprising, eh? And they don't lose it because their brochure is ugly. They don't lose it because they forgot to mention social media, staging, photos, video, website, or even open houses. They lose it because the seller is sitting there thinking one thing: can I actually trust this person when things get uncomfortable? That is the real listing appointment. Not the presentation, not the CMA, not the fancy pitch. The seller is trying to figure out, will this agent tell me the truth? Will they communicate well with me? Will they disappear after I sign? Will they pressure me into a price reduction without explaining why? And if I hire the wrong person, am I stuck? That is what's happening underneath the conversation. And most agents, well, they completely miss it. They walk in trying to prove how good they are. But the seller's not looking for confidence alone. They're looking for certainty. Certainty that you have a process. Certainty that you can communicate. Certainty that you know how to read the market. Certainty that if the home doesn't sell right away, you're not going to panic, hide, or blame the seller. After 24 years selling residential real estate and over 1,000 homes I've sold, and I'm still going on listing appointments every single week, I can tell you this: the agent who wins is not always the agent with the flashiest presentation. It's the agent who makes the seller feel safest making that decision. So in this video, I'm gonna walk you through the 3 things I present at every single listing appointment. Not some 27-point marketing promise, not a giant binder full of fluff. 3 things: communication, pricing, and my guarantee. And then I'm gonna give you a bonus strategy at the end that will separate you from any other agent they're interviewing. Because if you get these 3 things right, you stop sounding like a used car salesman. You start sounding like someone who has actually done this before. And if you're new here, I've been a licensed realtor since 2002. As shared, I've sold over 1,000 homes. I work almost predominantly with sellers. I sell about 50 houses a year, a house a week, a listing a week. I sit with sellers every single week. I run listing appointments, and I still deal with the heavy pricing conversations, the awkward feedback that comes in, and slow weeks, price reductions, and the sellers who want to just try a certain number. So this is not theory I'm giving you. This is what I use in real time in live listing appointments that I'm going on right now. And here is the big shift I want you to understand. A listing appointment is not about just getting the listing. That is the amateur way to think about it. The real goal is to set up the relationship so the listing does not fall apart later. Because getting the signature, it's easy compared to managing the seller when the market starts giving you feedback they do not want to hear. That is when agents struggle. They get the listing, they get the photos done, they put it on MLS, they send the link to the seller. Everything feels great. Then 1 week passes, no offers. Week 2 passes, showings slow down. Feedback starts trickling in. Buyers like the home, but not the price. Now the agent has to call the seller and have the conversation they should have prepared them for at the beginning of the listing launch. That is where the trust breaks. So my goal at the listing appointment is not just to say, here's what I'm gonna do to sell your home. My goal is to say, here's the process that we're going to work off of to make sure we sell your property. This is exactly how I'm going to communicate. This is how I read the market. This is how I interpret it. And this is how I remove the risk for you. That is a much stronger stance and position. So let's break down the 3 things. Number 1, communication. The first thing I present at every listing appointment is communication. And I want to be clear. I don't just say, I'll keep in touch. That's weak. Every agent says that. That sentence alone has absolutely no value unless the seller understands what the communication actually looks like. Because one of the biggest fears sellers have is that the agent is going to list the home and disappear and then only come back when they want a price reduction. And honestly, that fear is justified. A lot of sellers have had that experience, and you've likely heard it when you're sitting at the table with sellers who have sold or attempted to sell with another agent in the past. The agent is always available until the property comes on the market. Fast replies, lots of energy, big promises. And then once that listing goes live, the seller starts to hear less and less. That's a problem because silence creates anxiety, and anxiety creates doubt, and doubt destroys trust. So at the listing appointment, I explain exactly how I communicate, and I break it into 3 parts. Number 1, feedback. Number 2, previewing the competition, and number 3, how I communicate that to my clients with weekly Loom updates. So number 1, feedback. This is not just basic feedback. Basic feedback is usually useless. Basic feedback is useless and it's a waste of your time and their time. You know what I mean. The showing agent says the buyers like it. Great, but what does that actually mean? Liked it enough to buy it? Liked it enough to come back in? Liked it but thought it was overpriced? Liked it but liked another house better? Liked it but only would offer $75,000 less? See, that is specific feedback that you as an agent can't just take it as, we like the home. The reply back to that agent is like, great, what's the next step? Can we get you in for a second showing? Did you have any questions we can follow up? If you just take, we like the home and send it to your seller, you're done. A waste of time. What I tell my sellers is what I'm really looking for is not just whether the buyers like the home, I'm looking for how the buyers felt about your home compared to other value and other homes they've seen on the market. See, that's key. Ultimately, you need to share with your seller the feedback of what the market is saying, how their property stacks up against the current market. That's it, period, end of stop. You don't care if they liked your paint colors, if they like the tile, if they like the ensuite. That is all fluff and hot air. That's just emotional. You are a paid professional to interpret the market, collect accurate feedback, and share it with a seller. That's it. And a lot of agents right now just take this like random, oh, we thought it was a great home, we're looking at other properties. But what does that mean? A line I use all the time is, if I get feedback like that, what would it take for my listing to be number 1 on your list? Question mark. Done. That's what I need to hear. The feedback I get then from the agents is, well, if it was $75,000 less, it would be number 1. If it wasn't on the highway, backing on the highway would be number 1. And I say, great. What would the price have to be in relation to backing on the highway for this property to be number 1 for your clients? That's power. That is helpful. Why not get the other agents to help you with the pricing conversation? Instead of this being fully on your shoulders to try and guide a seller on price, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not having the market tell you what the price is saying, interpreting it, and then giving that to your seller. A lot of agents lose on that. They're making it way too difficult. It makes absolutely no sense. In fact, I should do a video on how to collect accurate feedback and send it out. And in fact, I'm going to do that. Next video is going to be about that. It's so important, and client and realtors miss it all the time. And their clients just get on, like, they romanticize that, oh, everyone likes my house. Everyone likes my house. That gets tired after a while when it doesn't sell. So you have to be more advanced. You have to be more strategic and proactive and make sure you're collecting the accurate feedback to be able to share directly with your sellers so they understand exactly where they are in relation to the open market. The next is previewing the competition. So this is a point I make at every single listing appointment. Real estate sells real estate. And what I mean by that is your home is competing against every other home on the market. People will go through your home and then they're going to go through other homes and then make a decision of what is the best value. So we need to know exactly how we stack up. Now, I'm actively involved in the inventory that's on the market on all of my listings. But it's one thing to see it online. It's another thing to physically go through. And there's a double-edged sword on this. Haha, my name's Swords. There's a benefit to this. You're showing to your seller how serious you're taking it. You're physically going through these other properties and reporting back. Like, that investment of time sets you up way different than simply saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this one just came on the market. I think it's priced aggressively and it's going to have an impact on ours. Versus, hey guys, this one just came on the market. I've booked in a preview where I'm physically going to walk through the property tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'm going to be looking at the features and benefits that that home has in relation to ours. I'm going to report back. We're not hitting the panic button. It's just, I'm going to do exactly what the buyer is going to do to your property. My goal and my job, you've hired me to interpret the market and provide you as sellers the most amount of information so you can make the best qualified decision. So I'll be going through, as I say, between two and 3. I'll be reporting back before the end of the day exactly how that property stacks up. And we can decide what we want to do with that. Like, so powerful. Now, you got to book the showing as a preview. I don't lie and say it's a showing when I don't have a showing. I also email the listing agent, explain why I'm going through, letting them know I have another property on the market close by. And my goal is to go through the property to see it. And if I have a buyer that is interested in my listing, I'd be happy to bring them to their listing. And oh, by the way, do they want to come through our listing? Like, why not? Like, we have to work together in this business. So there's such a benefit of previewing property. A, your seller's going to be happy with the investment of time you're making, and it shows how all in you are. Secondly, the listing agent is going to be happy to get someone through it. Also, you're sharing with them what you have on your property, because presumably they're going to be getting leads on their property that they may be able to bring to your listing. And third, you're active. You're going through more property. Like, who knows? You might be listing the neighbor's property next week, next month, next year. And you'll be like, you know what? I went through I went through your neighbor's property and it was on the market for $647. Yeah, I remember the basement, how it smelled musty and it sold for $615. Yeah, I went through that property. Like, such a benefit. Preview listings. Sellers love it. Listing agents are happy getting more exposure, and you're just opening yourself up to a larger audience potential down the road. My third point to the communication is Loom weekly seller updates. This is one of the simplest ways to separate yourself as a listing agent, because as you get busier, if you're following along the tips and tricks and you're really growing your business, you want life balance. Like, I'm a father, I got 2 young kids under 4. I got 11-month-old and a 3.5, almost 4-year-old. Time's precious. I'm home every single night to tuck my kids into bed. I do a lot of business. I personally represent 50 sellers a year. We sell a property a week on the listing side. You have to have systems in play. You have to have great communication, and you have to be able to communicate on your time to your sellers instead of setting up a time for a call and going to meet with them. It's impossible to do it all. So Loom, that's your savior. It's the simplest way to separate yourself from other listing agents and protect your time, because sellers don't want to feel like they're having to chase you, and you don't want to feel like you're just at mercy to them every time they want to talk to you. It's a major gap that a lot of agents have in their business. If a seller has to ask you any updates, that's a real problem, because the second they have to ask you that, they start wondering what else they're not being told. So I tell my sellers up front, you're not going to have to chase me for updates. I'm going to send you a weekly market update of everything that's happening on your property on Wednesdays. I like Loom because it lets me walk them through the market as an advisor on my time, recorded, that they can watch whenever they want. It's a form of accountability. Every week, week over week after week, I'm sending it. Now, I sell my properties quickly because I price them accurately, because I know how to understand the market data. So I'm not into like 7 weeks of these type of updates. Usually I'm a week or 2 on the market. I think my average days on market is 14 this year. But nonetheless, they are hiring you. They're paying you big money once it sells. You need to show them what you're actually doing. This is what happened last week. This is the feedback, which I've already sent you, but I highlighted again. This is what's the marketing we're doing this coming week. This is the competition presently on the market. I previewed these listings, which I've already told you about, but you review all of that. We're getting close to 21 days on market or 12 qualified showings. So we're going to have that conversation. All of the stuff that I train you on and telling you as agents how to handle a successful listing, all of that is captured consistently on a weekly basis through my Loom market updates. It's so valuable because the sellers aren't going to be guessing what's happening. They're completely informed. I say to my sellers all the time, when you work with me, you're going to know exactly where you stand. You're going to be able to see around corners. You should never be surprised. And part of the secret of what I do is I use Loom consistently every single day. I probably record 5 to 7 Looms a day. Definitely on Wednesdays, there's a lot more because that's when I do my seller updates, and being a heavy listing agent, I usually carry anywhere from like 5 to 10 listings at a time. And oh, by the way, I'm in the process of building a private community for residential real estate agents just like you, who want to scale without burning out. If you want more time, better systems, and a more predictable business year over year, instead of this crazy feast or famine like hamster wheel that you might feel you're on, I'll drop a link below. Check it out. No pressure, just something I'm building for agents who want to work smarter, not longer. All right, back at it. All right, second point I always talk about in my listing presentation is pricing. Because if you don't price the property well, it doesn't matter what you do, it's never going to sell. So I really get heavy into 21 days on the market or 12 qualified showings. That is the formula I use to determine what the market's saying. It's simple. 21 days on the market or 12 qualified showings, whichever comes first. If we don't have an offer or a compelling argument that we're going to get an offer, the market's speaking to us. It's telling us it's rejecting our price. And our job is to listen to that. So if you introduce this 21-day or 12 qualified showings after you're on the market, you're too late. You're done. You have to do it even before you come on the market, because it proves to your seller that you have a plan, you have a process, you have a formula. But if you spring this on them like day 5 or day 7 or after the 8th showing, they're like, this just smells like he's desperate for a price reduction. It'll blow up in your face. Trust me. I've been doing this for a number of years, but before I actually put together my framework for it, I wasn't doing it at the beginning and it wasn't working. When I explain this at the beginning of the listing process, which I do all the time, it works so well. They understand it. They're not as frustrated. Like, they're not as disappointed because they know it's coming. They understand it's not me, it's the market. What we are trying to do is interpret the market. We can't control the market. We can only interpret the market. You're introducing logic into an emotional situation. So I introduce that early on. I say, we're going to choose the best price based upon the market data, the condition of your property, and the competition. But once we go live, the market gets to vote on that. That line is critical. The market gets to vote, because no matter how good your CMA is, the buyer decides if your price is compelling or not. Not the seller, not the agent, not the neighbor, the buyer. The buyer decides the price. The seller decides if they agree with it. That's real estate 101. So if you list your home and you get strong showings, good feedback, second looks, and an offer, the market's telling us we're in the range. And if we hit 21 days or 12 qualified showings and there's no offer, we have to look at the market because the market is speaking to us. Now, I call them qualified showings, so 12 qualified showings. I'm not talking about an open house where you have 9 random nosy neighbors coming through. Not at all. I'm talking about 12 independent private showings with their own independent representation. The ones that are serious, the ones that are pre-qualified, that can actually buy the property. That's the data. And this is where I explain one of the simplest truths in real estate. There are really only 3 reasons why a property doesn't sell: condition, location, and price. That's it. I had a conversation last night with a seller of mine about this same reason: condition, location, and price. You know, condition, property's in great shape. And in this market and in your market, likely you're not going to advise your client to drop $50,000 immediately and hopefully get the 50 back. You might only get 35,000 back. Like, so risky pouring money to get it back immediately. You need the market to like penetrate that and appreciate and ride over time. Location, you're not going to pick the property up and move it to another location. The location's the location. The only factor really in your control is price. And price, there's no real downside risk on that. You adjust the price, it doesn't move, you take the property off the market, you don't sell. You just don't keep it on for too long where it becomes stigmatized and a blemish. But price is the only factor really in your control as a seller. Not condition, not location, price. And when you explain it at the beginning of your listing appointment, it's not going to be a surprise when you come back to that and you remind them of what you talked about 3 weeks earlier. 21 days on the market, 12 qualified showings, 3 reasons why property doesn't sell: condition, location, or price. Price is the one in our control. It makes sense. You're proactively explaining it before you actually have to get that decision made. You start this too late, uphill battle. They're not going to believe you. They're going to just think you're a used car salesman trying to get a commission check. It gives you a checkpoint. It makes the pricing conversation objective. It gives the seller a process instead of a surprise. So later, if we reach that point, I'm not calling them out of the blue and saying, we need a price reduction. Instead, I say, this is the exact checkpoint we talked about. We said 12 days on the market or 12 qualified showings. Without an offer, we would stop and evaluate the market and reposition the price to make sure we can get you top dollar in this market. That's leadership, and you're not reacting. You're following the plan. And that matters because price reductions are emotional for sellers and for listing agents. Nobody wants to hear the market is not accepting their price, but it's much easier to have that conversation when the seller has agreed to the framework up front. The mistake agents make is they avoid the hard conversations at the beginning, and then they're forced to have the harder conversation later. Do the opposite. Have the honest conversation early. Tell the seller how you're going to measure the market. Tell them what the checkpoint is. Tell them what no offers means. Tell them how you'll interpret feedback, because if you can't lead the pricing conversation before the listing launches, you're going to have a very difficult time when the listing becomes stale. Pricing is not just a number. Pricing is a strategy, and the seller needs to know how that strategy will be evaluated. The third thing I talk about in all of my listing presentation is my guarantee. And it's not a guarantee that I'm going to buy your house. That's just some like BS stuff that, anyhow, I won't get into it. I don't subscribe to that. But what I do subscribe to is guarantee to release my clients at any point they want. So I sign an easy exit, an upfront cancellation. I've done it for 24 years. Like the first month or two I got in the business because I had no experience. And if you're a new agent, I'd encourage you to do that because they're betting on you, but you've never sold a property before. But if you say, you know what, we have a contractual agreement here for 60, 90, 120 days, whatever your board forces you to do, let them know you can cancel at any time. Now, you're betting on yourself, but why wouldn't you bet on yourself? And they're betting on you with potentially no experience, or if you have a lot of experience like me, there's still some uncertainty. I can talk a really good game, but some people think it might be too good. Liam, 1,000 properties, 24 years selling? Like, really? What if he's just hot air? What if he just brings me in and then I never hear from Liam because he just passes me to one of his team members? I don't want that. Every single one of my listing appointments, I sign an upfront cancellation. Now, never in my 24 years has a seller canceled on me. I've actually canceled on a number of clients over, 1,000 properties I've sold. Definitely, there's been some listings that it's just not the right fit. I'm usually really good at qualifying and making sure I'm working with the right sellers where there's common goals and a mutually beneficial outcome. But I've definitely canceled on sellers, but I have never had a seller cancel on me. It could happen. But even to this day, I sign an upfront cancellation. It just de-risks the entire situation. Like I got a listing appointment I went on yesterday. I'm back in on Friday. I will 100% provide them that cancellation. Now, they are interviewing two other agents. It's, husband, wife. Husband was a lawyer. He's retired. His wife was a librarian. She's retired, but very detailed, risk adverse, lawyer, quite curious how contracts look and the what ifs and what risk would look like if it goes. When I told him upfront yesterday at my walkthrough appointment that I signed an upfront cancellation, I could just feel the ease in the room. I am 99.9% sure the other two agents that they're interviewing are not offering that cancellation guarantee. I'm already ahead of the game before I even go back in for my second step to present my pricing, marketing plan, fee structure, and how I'm going to go to market to that property. They want me now, which is great. So strongly encourage you to consider a easy exit, a cancellation upfront guarantee, because then you're really betting on yourself. You're taking the risk. You're incurring the cost. There's no fee they owe you if it doesn't sell. So you're truly offering them an opportunity to work with you with very, very low risk on their end as sellers. Risk on your end. That's why you need to make sure you're pricing the property accurately from the beginning. And my bonus tip is getting a formal appraisal done. So I use this, once every month or two, depending on the property. So for unique property, luxury property, sometimes rural property, I have one in my marketplace, probably like the nicest, biggest property in a suburban area. So in that pocket, average price point, probably like $850,000, $900,000. This property I think is 1.3, 1.4 million, but I don't know exactly what it is. And if I misprice it from the beginning, I'm in trouble. I have one shot on this property. So in my listing presentation, I shared with the seller who I was having good rapport, was going well. And I said, this is what the data is suggesting. But what I would like to do is I would like to have a formal third-party appraisal done on the property. I will cover the cost of that. And we can use that as visibility into what an appraiser would be giving the value for this property. Not to say you have to go with it, but that can be somewhat of another benchmark that we can use. That alone got me the listing. The seller told me that. She's like, Liam, it's the right fit. I like working with you, but the other agents weren't doing that. There's a vagueness in the pricing that they were giving. This makes so much sense. Plus, the appraiser has no financial interest in coming in higher, coming in low. They get paid their $500 for the appraisal. So that is my bonus tip for you on a listing presentation. If you have a difficult property where you're not sure exactly how to price, spend the $500-600, get a formal appraisal done. It will put you, light years ahead of anyone else that they might be interviewing, because most people are not doing that. They're just going through winging it, either trying to buy the listing by coming in high or coming in low because they don't want to get stuck with a property that's never going to sell. So the bonus tip, get a formal appraisal done. It can only help you with that tough pricing conversation. So to wrap this all up in a bow for you, if I were simplifying my listing appointment, I'd break it into 3 areas. Number 1, communication. Number 2, pricing. Number 3, guarantee. Communication, because sellers need to know they're not going to be left in the dark. They need to know what the feedback is, how it's collected, and how you interpret it. They also need to know what the competition. Remember, real estate sells real estate. It's not just a matter of, hey guys, new property on the street came on the market. It's like, hey guys, this new property was listed. I booked in a time tomorrow at 2:00. I'm going to go through it, determine the features and benefits that it has in relation to yours. I'll let you know how it looks. And last, you need to know how you're going to be able to communicate this. Then pricing, because if the sellers aren't clear on pricing, if you don't have a plan or a formula, you're going to get stuck. So use the framework, 21 days or 12 qualified showings. We hit that point without an offer, we're just guessing. If we hit that point without an offer, the market is speaking to us. We need to seriously look at the price. Then upfront cancellation guarantee. As I say, it removes all the risk, shows confidence. It says, I'm willing to earn the relationship day by day by day. I'm not going to be sitting back just waiting. And then my bonus tip, formal appraisals. Not for every property, just the difficult properties or multiple decision makers, or when a seller wants another layer of confidence on price. It can be extremely useful. That's the framework. Not a giant presentation full of fluff, not endless marketing promise, not a rehearsed pitch that sounds like a used car salesman. 3 things. This is how I communicate. This is how I evaluate the price. This is how I remove risk. That is what the sellers care about, because at the end of the day, the seller's not just hiring you to put the home on MLS. They're hiring you to lead them through the uncertainty. That's the job. When the feedback is good, you lead. When the feedback is bad, you lead. When the showings slow down, you lead. When the price needs to change, you lead. When the seller gets emotional, you lead. You getting the trend here? Leadership starts at the listing appointment, not 3 weeks later when the house doesn't sell and you're worried, concerned, you're losing money. It's going to blow up in your face. So don't walk into your next listing appointment with 25 random talking points. Walk in there with a clean framework: communication, pricing, and a guarantee. Explain those 3 really well, and you'll instantly sound more experienced, more confident, and more trustworthy. And let me know how it goes in the comment section below, or shoot me a quick email. I'd be happy to give you my professional opinion as a colleague in the business on how you can enhance your listing presentation. Because if you list better, you're going to love this game. You got to get out of just working with buyers. And listings take time to perfect. And one thing that I would strongly encourage you to do is watch my next video right here, because I break down exactly how I price homes to sell in any market. Check it out.